I came across some information from certain podcasters, certain people in the field of the Caitlin Clark department, connected the dots. And everything in this video, I will have to say, is alleged, but it is alarming. But it is not fact, it is alleged.
Something has fractured inside the Indiana Fever organization, and this time it isn't about a missed shot or a flawed game plan. It's about power control and a father's heritage being challenged by his own son.
Now, we know the Indiana Fever basketball team is owned by the Simon family. Now, we know Caitlin Clark, when they drafted Caitlin Clark, she was the biggest name in all of sports. She got drafted, boom, bow, Christy Size, y'all know the Olympic break, blah, 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 all that stuff happened. She got snubbed, big storyline. Now, what transpired in the second half of the season was that Christy Size came to the realization that she needed to run Caitlin's system and run through Caitlin. And guess what happened? They instantly started winning, and they made the playoffs for the first time in a mighty long time.
Accounts are circulating that the owner's son, enraged by how Stephanie White allegedly mishandled Caitlin Clark, has intervened behind the curtain. Talk of secret meetings, stifled voices, and inner turmoil is moving quickly through the league. What truly occurred inside the Fever's locker room, and why has the owner's family abruptly turned against its own coach? Let's unpack all of it.
But make a long story short, Stephanie White came. Stephanie White came with an agenda. Stephanie White came with a plan. Now, I'm not making this a whole week of just attacking Stephanie. That's not what I'm trying to do. We know that Stephanie White came with this motion offense. It took the ball out of Caitlin Clark's hands, right?
When Caitlin Clark was drafted by the Indiana Fever, she was more than just another rookie. She was a moving empire. Ticket sales surged, jersey figures broke records, and the Fever transformed from a forgotten team into the most discussed topic in all of women's sports.
Caitlin Clark, when they drafted Caitlin Clark, she was the biggest name in all of sports. Coming out of Iowa, she was the hottest thing smoking. I said this yesterday, and I'll say this before. Caitlin Clark's trajectory was out of here. So, I mean, something like we never seen before. Her coming out of college, man. I've been here, I synced it. And it was just a remarkable feat just to see this young lady come from Iowa, do what she's able to do on a basketball court.
But beneath that success, a subtle tension started brewing between Stephanie White's coaching style and the desires of the Simon family, the billionaires who control both the Fever and the Indiana Pacers. Sources near the organization allege that Stephen Simon, son of the 90-year-old owner Herb Simon, was becoming progressively frustrated with White's management of Clark. He purportedly felt the team's offense was stifling Caitlin's innate style, that dazzling Logo 3 shooting ability that made fans leap to their feet. Rather than letting Clark direct the game, White implemented a slow, deliberate system that took away her creativity.
And ultimately, Caitlin Clark did get hurt, but what else happened? Ticket sales went down. Viewership went down. Caitlin Clark buzz went down because that Logo 3 Caitlin, we didn't have that Logo 3 Caitlin no more. Logo 3 Caitlin was gone.
Viewership began to slide, the excitement cooled down, and within Pacers entertainment, the atmosphere became tense. Stephen purportedly confronted senior executives, asking for explanations as to why the team's biggest star appeared so restricted on the floor. Those near the situation portray him as defensive, not only of Caitlin as an athlete, but of the corporate empire she embodied. Every single missed shot under White's strict offense wasn't merely a basketball problem, it was a problem for the brand, and that is where the internal strife really started.
Now, some of this stuff is not going to be in order, guys. But let's read this. It says, now after that meeting I just mentioned, Steve Simon called Kelly Christoph, Amber Cox, and Stephanie White into his office and let them know, not uncertain terms, that this was CC team from here on out.
White, recognized for her decisive leadership, was not prepared to yield to external pressure. But Stephen Simon was more than just external pressure. He represented the future of the Simon family's vast empire. As the friction intensified, rumors moved through the organization that Clark's health and recovery information was being poorly managed or even manipulated to minimize her discomfort and secure team control. Something was clearly fracturing internally. Indiana and the front office conflict was only getting started.
He stated, from what I understand and what I was told, when Stephanie White was told this, she hit the roof because she didn't like it. And Steve Simon told her, you don't have to like it, but it's that way. Now, this is, from my understanding, this is a conversation that happened at the conclusion of the season.
When Stephanie White assumed control of the Fever, she arrived with assurance and a strategy. Her plan centered on structure, discipline, and running her trademark motion offense. In theory, it seemed perfect, but on the court, observers soon saw that something was wrong. And Caitlin Clark wasn't the same dynamic player from Iowa. The liberty that made her a unique scorer appeared to disappear instantly. Her attempts at shots declined, her on-court posture shifted, and the spark that once pulled millions to their televisions started to wane. Behind the scenes, insiders allege White was intent on shaping Clark into her system's player, even if that meant removing the very style that made her extraordinary. She desired a team-first method, not a Caitlin Clark spectacle, but this choice reputedly did not sit well with the Simon family. To them, Clark was more than a rookie, she was a literal gold mine. The Fever's ticket income, merchandise profits, and sponsorship agreements were all connected to her name. Each time White benched Clark late in a game or restricted her role, those business metrics fell. The conflict grew more apparent when news emerged that Clark was handling persistent injuries. Still, per some sources, White minimized her status, claiming she was fit to play. This only amplified theories that Clark's health was not the top priority, and that White was defending her coaching story over her star athlete's welfare. That's when Stephen Simon reportedly intervened. Those who know him say he saw White's strategy as both irresponsible and destructive, not only to Clark, but to the whole Fever brand. Whispers of tense phone calls, private discussions, and urgent communications started to spread among the staff. It was no longer a simple basketball dispute. It was a fight for control, for honesty, and for reputation. And as Clark's on-court play suffered, Stephen's patience was wearing thin. Stephen Simon was not a person who actively sought the limelight. For many years, he operated quietly in the background, managing the business operations of Pacers Entertainment, while his father, Herb Simon, was the public figurehead. But when news of Caitlin Clark's issues and White's rigid coaching style began to surface on social media, Stephen reportedly felt he could not remain quiet. To him, this was not simply a coaching problem. It was an immediate danger to the organization's name and its financial prospects. Per insiders, Stephen convened a critical internal meeting with top executives Amber Cox and Kelly Crosscuff. The directive was sharp. The team's performance under White was not acceptable. He supposedly challenged why a player of Clark's stature, the single most marketable star in women's basketball, was being diminished to a secondary player. He insisted on full transparency regarding Clark's health and charged White with concealing vital informants from the owners to keep command of team operations. The atmosphere was reportedly thick with tension. White apparently defended her actions, stating the team was shielding Clark by managing her minutes and her overall workload. But Stephen did not believe her. He felt the harm was already inflicted, not just on Caitlin's public persona, but on the whole Fever franchise. Supporters were turning against the team, criticizing the coaching on social media, and asking why Clark seemed so frustrated in almost every post-game press conference. That meeting signaled a significant power shift. Inside the Fever's main office, for the very first time, someone with the Simon name directly challenged White's command. And when the son of a billionaire owner gets involved in basketball matters, everyone listens. After the discussion, rumors spread throughout the organization. Was Stephanie White's time running out? Was Stephen Simon getting ready to initiate a coaching change before the upcoming season? These questions started to reverberate on social media and sports programs, preparing the ground for a much more intense clash within the Indiana Fever's empire. Following that confrontation, the mood inside the Indiana Fever front office reportedly changed overnight. Employees noted an uneasy quiet, the type that often precedes a major storm. Then the information began to leak. A series of anonymous messages started showing up on fan pages and smaller sports podcasts, suggesting a significant dispute had occurred between Stephen Simon and Stephanie White in private. Some said Stephen insisted that the team's future must be built with Caitlin Clark, not against her. Others alleged he accused White of showing disrespect to the young star and disregarding medical advice on her recovery schedule. Though none of this is officially verified, the consistency of the reports across several podcasts, such as Livewire Sports and Venom Reacts, only added fuel to the rumors. What made the whole affair even more volatile was that some details appeared too precise to be mere speculation. People were using names, citing supposed quotes from the meeting, and even referencing timestamps from internal communications that allegedly supported the sequence of events. Fans online started to put the pieces together. Why was Caitlin Clark's health status updated so often? Why did her spirit seem low after games? And why did White suddenly cease to mention her recovery updates in interviews? The more questions that were asked, the more silent the Fever organization became. Stephen Simon, based on some insider accounts, wasn't merely angry, he was mortified. The public story had changed from Caitlin Clark is saving the WNBA to Caitlin Clark is faltering under poor coaching, and to him, that was completely unacceptable for a brand his family had worked for decades to build. The alleged breaking point was when Stephen supposedly informed top executives that Stephanie White didn't need to approve, but she would manage things his way. That declaration, if it happened, was the point. The owner's son went from an observer to a power player, and that choice would send shockwaves through the entire Fever franchise. After that contentious meeting, operations inside the Fever camp supposedly went silent. Media access was increasingly limited, injury reports became non-specific, and athletes were instructed to concentrate on basketball when questioned about Caitlin Clark's condition. But to supporters and insiders, it was clear that something was not right. Clark's own body language revealed more than any official statement. She appeared exhausted, tentative, and strangely detached from her fellow players. It was no longer just about her physical healing. It was about confidence, power, and whether her opinion was being ignored within her own organization. Based on numerous fan podcasts, Stephanie White purportedly attempted to regain control by altering the public story. She stressed team cohesion, minimized Clark's playing time, and presented her careful strategy as a way of protecting Caitlin for her future career. But these statements felt empty to fans who had seen Clark excel at Iowa without ever needing such protection. The statistics presented their own evidence. Viewership declined, ticket sales slowed, and even merchandise revenue fell once Clark's star quality seemed diminished. In the background, Stephen Simon was said to be livid. He reportedly interpreted the narrative spin as a cover-up, an effort to obscure the true issue, that the coaching team had bungled both Clark's rehabilitation and her role in business language. He considered it brand sabotage. Each guarded press conference, each strange timeout, and each limited minute for Clark meant millions lost in forward momentum. The term "the Clark effect" had once been the WNBA's biggest advantage, a beacon of progress and thrill, but under Stephanie White's direction, that effect was quickly diminishing. Stephen allegedly stated clearly that the Fever's path had to be corrected, even if it required dismissing the individual at the heart of the dispute. By now, the issue was larger than just basketball. It was about responsibility and who truly wielded authority within the Indiana Fever organization. As rumors became major news, the tension at Pacers Entertainment hit a critical point. Executives who had previously backed Stephanie White began to create distance. Emails were not answered. Phone calls were not returned, and meetings that used to involve White were suddenly taking place without her. A change had occurred, and everyone in the organization could sense it. Stephen Simon, per insiders, was no longer just expressing his discontent. He was moving to act. Accounts indicate he started to quietly reassign internal duties, shifting more authority to individuals who agreed with his perspective on Caitlin Clark's treatment. This group included marketing heads and corporate strategists who grasped the importance of Clark's following and her significance to the franchise's long-term success. The implication was unmistakable. This was not simply about basketball tactics any longer. This was about safeguarding an investment valued in the millions. Stephanie White, in the meantime, was becoming more and more isolated. Sources portrayed her as defiant but rattled. She felt she was being subverted by individuals who failed to grasp the pressures of coaching, and she was not hesitant to display that frustration during team discussions. Players reportedly observed her demeanor change, becoming less open to collaboration and more defensive. Clark, always the consummate professional, stayed silent publicly, but observers could sense the strain in her post-game interviews. Privately, several players started to doubt the leadership structure. Was White still the one in charge? Was the ownership losing its faith in her? Or was the team already getting ready for a transition before the next season even started? At the same time, Stephen Simon's exasperation apparently reached his father. For Herb Simon, who had established his empire on consistent leadership and trust, the chaos was a source of embarrassment. The family's name was being discussed on sports talk programs, and that sort of attention was not beneficial for business at this point. The issue was no longer if something would change, it was the very foundation of trust within the Indiana Fever had been broken, and everyone was simply waiting to see who would be the first to fall. The definitive moment arrived quietly, not with a press release or a formal announcement, but with a telling silence. Stephanie White began to miss certain media appearances, and her typical self-assured manner was gone from her interviews. Insiders noted she seemed exhausted, depleted by the weeks of rising friction. Concurrently, Stephen Simon was said to be phoning league contacts himself, avoiding the usual communication routes. A move like that was unheard of, showing that the ownership's patience with the team's management had run out. Around this time, observers started to see odd discrepancies. Caitlin Clark would be seen at practice one day, only to be unexpectedly benched the next. The reasons provided by White and team representatives never seemed to align. Some said it was for load management. Others suggested Clark herself had wanted to play through her discomfort but was denied. These inconsistencies created even more speculation that something within the Fever organization had fractured completely. The locker room energy reportedly turned hostile. A number of players stood by White, thinking she was acting in the team's best interest for development. Others aligned with Clark, upset that her immense star power was being stifled rather than highlighted. The division was stark, and once Stephen Simon learned that team morale was at rock bottom, it became the last straw. Sources indicate Stephen initiated an internal audit, requesting formal reports from the coaching staff and trainers on every medical choice made concerning Clark's recovery. This action shocked the organization. It was more than just a review. It was a clear statement. Someone would be made responsible within a matter of days. Journalists started to hear about internal reorganizations, and speculation intensified. Was White on the verge of being fired? Was Stephen advocating for a complete leadership overhaul? Nobody could say for sure, but one thing was definite: the conflict that started over coaching tactics had become a major power struggle that could potentially redefine the entire future of the Indiana Fever. Once the situation began to calm, the Indiana Fever were more than just a basketball team. They had become a headline generator. Every sports news source was searching for information, and every podcast was guessing at the true extent of the conflict. Within the organization, staff communicated in hushed tone. The once stable foundation that Herb Simon had created had descended into chaos, and the cause of that chaos was pointed directly at Stephanie White's management of Caitlin Clark. Stephen Simon, now firmly in control of the matter, reportedly confronted senior management again. He stated unequivocally that the Simon family's reputation would not be linked to any stories of player mistreatment or poorly handled injuries. His manner, as one insider noted, was a mix of controlled rage, a businessman's anger combined with personal letdown. For him, this was not solely about protecting a star player. It was about protecting a family legacy that took decades to build. In the meantime, Stephanie White's allies attempted to maintain their position, claiming the rumors were overblown. But as each day went by, more problems emerged. Sponsors began to inquire. The WNBA's main office was apparently updated on the internal review, and Clark's agents were becoming more assertive behind the scenes. The conflict had extended well beyond Indiana. It was now a national issue. Fans, who were once split, started to rally around a single idea: Caitlin Clark was owed better. Hashtags such as Free Caitlin and Let Her Play began to circulate again, reflecting the anger of fans who felt her brilliance had been dimmed by ineffective leadership. For the Simon family, this was simply not acceptable. Their billion-dollar name was being mired in controversy, and Stephen was left with no option but to take action, be it through termination, reorganization, or forcing a resignation. A change was imminent. The signal was clear. The Fever were on the verge of being rebuilt from the highest levels, and anyone who blocked that path, Stephanie White included, was going to be pushed aside. The turmoil inside the Indiana Fever is now much more than a sports story. It's a fight for command, for honesty, and for respect. What started as discontent over coaching has escalated into a major power struggle that could completely alter the team's future, with Stephen Simon emerging from his father's influence to protect both Caitlin Clark and the Simon family name. One thing is certain: staying silent is no longer a viable choice, regardless of whether Stephanie White remains or departs. The message has been delivered. Caitlin Clark is not merely the public face of the Fever. She is the very basis for its future survival.